The chair recognizes the honorable member for East Grand Bahama.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, it is a privilege and an honor to stand in this honorable House and to be at least the lead speaker for this year's budget exercise. Madam Speaker, before I get into the substantive presentation, there were just a couple of things that I would wish to clarify and also mention. First, I want to just bring condolences on behalf of myself and the rest of the constituency for the loss of Patrice Rowe, who was a team member of ours who passed away recently from cancer. Madam Speaker, I heard the Prime Minister's remarks earlier this morning, and that I got some information from the former Minister of Education. And the former Minister of Education said that our government spent $39 million on school repairs, over $26 million on school repairs in New Providence, and over $6 million in school repairs in Grand Bahama. In Grand Bahama, I can particularly attest to having seen post-Dorian the most repairs that had taken place, I believe, in a very, very long time. In fact, it wasn't ordinary repairs, because obviously those schools had been severely affected, and so this government had spent millions of dollars on repairing them. As well as, sometimes, Madam Speaker, the other side trivializes what we went through in COVID. And the lockdowns and curfews, they speak about it in a very, what I would call a very flippant manner. But imposing a constitutional lockdown or a constitutional curfew was a very serious matter at that time. And the fact that you had to do it, one, was done based on medical recommendations, and two, it actually saved thousands of lives. So we cannot just trivialize it by saying, these things had happened and there's no effect of it and so on. Madam Speaker, I also was particularly disappointed in a comment or what was said to be a question that the Prime Minister spoke about. I know he clarified it and he said it was a question, but it was particularly disappointing that one would speak or ask a question which, as the Minister of Finance, you would actually know the answer to this. That you would speak and ask a question in a way to assert that such a thing would have happened. And that is the question with respect to these credit cards for cabinet ministers' spouses. That really, I think, was punching below the belt. And as a statesman, I would have expected that one would not have gone to the length of speaking about anyone in this House spouses. And so that particularly was very, very disappointing. Madam Speaker, this year we celebrate 50 years of independence.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for West Cranbourne and Bimini.
And of course, you know, we don't intend to interrupt at all. But just for the record, though, there are two things. First of all, I think it's important for us to point out that at no time does this side trivialize the lockdowns or what had to be done, and we
think every time you speak
and
about it,
we also accept the recommendations that came from the professionals. At no time are we trivializing that work and the fact that many lives were in fact saved. But secondly, insofar as the spouse is concerned, I think the Prime Minister this morning, when he raised the question, the truth is, we must remember, there was an increase in what was given spouses and provided for spouses on trips. There was. That didn't exist before. That never existed
how many
before.
times has spouse been on
That
on
never
insurance?
existed
It's a
before.
different
But it
point.
is a
It's a
question.
totally different
It is a
point.
point. It is a point, Madam Speaker, just for the record, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, honorable member. You may continue, honorable
Yes,
member.
then, I think now you really muddied the
Of
water.
course.
Now you really sort of muddied it.
But I suppose it.
Because the point that you raised is a completely different point. The point that you raised, or the point that the Prime Minister spoke about, was a point about giving members' wives credit cards.
Of course, yes.
Which is absolute nonsense that you would give any member. In fact, it's absolute nonsense because as a cabinet minister, I never had a credit card. So why would my spouse have a credit card? It makes absolutely no sense to even ask that kind of a question, Madam Speaker. But Madam Speaker, this is the year we celebrate. It is the year we celebrate 50th anniversary. So I've got, as the member for Exuma said, I've gotten that off my chest. And it is not just a year to celebrate, but this is really a defining moment for us as a nation. This budget should have been just as ambitious, just as bold, just as transformative as the Bahamian spirit has been over the last 50 years. The reality is, while the public purse has recovered, families, ordinary mothers and fathers, ordinary young people who are coming out of school, small businesses, they continue to suffer. The member for Foxhill asked the question that he's never seen so much requests coming. Well, the requests are coming because people are still suffering. The requests are coming not because any different circumstance, but they are coming because of the situations that they face. Bahamians don't want to come to members of parliament. They come to us because they need to come to members of parliament because of the circumstances that they are facing. The Prime Minister spoke for 2 hours last time, another 2 hours this morning, but failed to even mention the new sugar tax, failed to give details on NIB, failed to speak about the boat registration, failed to speak about the increased harbor dues, failed to speak about the new hotel condo tax, failed to speak about the real property tax, and failed to speak about that. Sadly, this budget does not provide any assistance for the national contentment or security. It doesn't address those things at all and treats the private sector with contempt and disdain. Unfortunately, this budget is still out of touch with the everyday challenges that Bahamians are facing. The budget lacks the vision to mitigate the severe effects of inflation, and this was again spoken by the member for Vauxhall. The member for Vauxhall said crime may be a difficulty, but he believes that inflation is the most serious thing. Well, I agree with him that inflation is one of the most serious things, and this budget fails to address inflation. does nothing to reduce the high unemployment. It is void of ideas to advance the ease of doing business and digitization, and makes it more and more expensive and difficult to do business.
Yes, sir.
This is not, and I stress not, a budget for the people. Madam Speaker, the PLP government has been nothing but consistent. If anything, they've been consistent. They have been consistent lawbreakers. There is one law for them and another law for everyone else. And this budget is no different. They are consistent in breaching the Central Bank Act and had to come to Parliament to clean up the illegal loan that was provided by Central Bank. They consistently breached the Procurement Act.
Yes.
They did not follow the Procurement Act in the bidding process or in the process of choosing someone for the proposed new prison. A new prison that has increased in cost without what I say is sufficient explanation. They do not provide details of contracts awarded, and they have not produced the required annual report on all procurement activities. All of this is lined up, not just in the previous Procurement Act, but in the one they passed. It is in the one that they passed, which they, again, have refused to follow. They are consistent lawbreakers. They have been consistent when they breach their own Public Financial Management Act by not submitting the legally required reports from the Fiscal Responsibility Council. Remember the Fiscal Responsibility Council? There are now 3 reports that the council has not submitted. In fact, we do not even know the composition of the Fiscal Responsibility Council after it was reported that the chairman demitted office. They are not serious, Madam Speaker. They are not serious about this watchdog council. And our entire system will suffer because of it. And now, in this budget process, they are attempting to create a special fund whose process, I say, does not comply with the law or the Constitution. Now, I did hear the Prime Minister, not in this place, but in another place, speak about the proposed sugar tax. But his statement only adds to the confusion about the situation.
Yes.
Why would you submit legislation that would allow the Prime Minister to unilaterally create or to put in place tax measures, and then the Prime Minister then, not in this place, where he should have said it, but in another place, say, well, don't worry about that. That ain't gonna happen right now.
Yep.
Well, if it's not gonna happen right now, why don't you withdraw the legislation today? I challenge them to withdraw it today. Quite frankly, we just don't believe you. You said there was no new taxes, but yet there are taxes and there are fees. You said that you would reduce crime, but the fear of crime, I believe, is at an all-time high. You said that you would provide funding for small businesses to the tune of $50 million, but you have not. You said that you would reduce the cost of electricity.
It's going up.
The cost of electricity is actually going up, as opposed to them reducing the cost of electricity. People, unfortunately, just do not believe this government. Madam Speaker, the Public Financial Management Immigration Levy Fund Bill, which was tabled it does create a special fund. Now, this fund seeks to collect revenue derived from levies or taxes that are paid from under the Immigration Act and that are also paid under customs. I want you to get this, Madam Speaker, because what this piece of legislation does, I believe the PLP has a fundamental challenge with this levy as it is presented. We take strong issue with the amendments to the Immigration Act and the Customs Management Act that seek to delegate taxation powers down to the minister. How can we in this House agree to give a minister the ability to tax without knowing what the amount of tax is?
Willy-nilly.
How could we agree to delegate that to a minister when we don't know who will have to pay this tax? How could we agree to give this and delegate this over to a minister when we don't even know what items will be taxed? The amendments would allow for the minister to unilaterally establish and set these mandatory rates and levies to be charged to taxpayers. Why would we give the minister the ability to set any rate on any item in any circumstance? Why would we even agree to do that? When this is the place where you should be presenting what should be taxed, why it should be taxed, and you should be justifying those things to the public. The entire premise, Madam Speaker, of every democracy is that there is no taxation without representation. It is only in this House, through the elected representatives of the people, through Parliament, who can give the right to establish and change taxes and fees to be deployed to defray the central government's expenses. The budget speech and the Prime Minister's contribution today had absolutely no mention of any possible sugar tax or wellness tax. Yet the government is still proposing to move forward with an amendment to the Customs Management Act that would delegate these to the Prime Minister or delegate these to the Minister of Finance with the ability to levy any amount on any item without first seeking parliamentary approval. Madam Speaker, this is simply unheard of. Madam Speaker, can we even trust, and I move to the deficit now, can we even trust the government's deficit figure? You know, we all remember the deficit debacle. You know, I misspoke. It was the speechwriter's issue, the speechwriter's fault, last budget communication. The Prime Minister stated that he expects to beat this year's deficit by almost $50 million. But will he really beat this year's deficit by $50 million? We fail to see where the Prime Minister included the $110 million loan to BPL. Now, he is legally obligated to put this in the budget under the law. That if the government is going to loan monies to a state-owned enterprise, they can only loan that money if it is appropriated in the budget and it is shown in the budget. It is a loan. It is a loan under your debt management plan. It is in your debt management plan where $110 million goes.
We believe in you.
And, yeah, you may not have
We
known.
know you know better.
You're not in this.
You know better.
Where your financial secretary confirmed to the press that, yes, we indeed loaned $110 million to BPL.
Yeah, they ain't listening.
Honorable member for East Grand Bahama, are you yielding? Thank you, sir. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Tall Pines.
I didn't want to because I was out there having a meeting and came in when the member for East Grand Bahama spoke about the Customs Management Amendment Bill 2023. And he was referring to the amendment of Section 354 of the Principal Act, which speaks specifically to the minister may, after consultation with the Minister of Health, make regulations providing for the payment of health and wellness levy for the imported specified goods and domestically manufactured goods. Madam Speaker, when this was laid, I did receive a call from the various news dailies about what does this really mean. And for the last year, I spoke specifically about the need to look at potential levy with certain foods that have been implicated with chronic non-communicable diseases. I made a statement indicating that the Ministry of Health and Wellness, based on recommendations from PAHO and WHO, were looking at the possibility of putting deterrent tax on sugar-sweetened beverages, industrial-produced trans fats, to eliminate them out of the country, and to put a tax on naturally recurrent trans fats. In our STEP survey in 2019, it is clear that the health and wellness of our country is of urgent importance, and this particular amendment was a tax for deterrent. I made reference to it, and the Prime Minister made it very clear in the dailies that this tax is not to be implemented in this year's budget. No, let me finish. Let me finish. This bill allows us to go through the consultative process and the education process throughout the Commonwealth of the Bahamas and speak to the various industries.
Strategy.
But this is definitely something that is not going to happen in this budget cycle. So why are you bringing it as if it is a part of this cycle? No, it is no need to withdraw the bill. It is not in this budget. It is not in this budget cycle. That's what I want to clarify. So for him to make it appear to the Bahamian people that this tax... Let me finish. Let me finish. No, let me finish. There's no need to withdraw the bill. What letter? No. Listen here. Just as your Minister of Health...
Honorable members.
Your Minister of Health in your last administration did the honorable thing to push for this particular... I, as the Minister of Health, based on the domino theory that is taking place in the entire region, it is my responsibility. But I am only one voice around the table. The reality is, no, there's no need to withdraw this bill. This bill is to foreshadow what is potentially to come with the representation and consultation with the Bahamian people.
Thank you, honorable member.
After listening to the member for Tall Pines, I am even more opposed. I am even more opposed to this bill. We are even more opposed to this bill. Because what they are attempting to do is to put in place a mechanism where they can put in place a tax without first coming back to this house and telling the people what the tax is. So we don't support it.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Tall Pines.
Rest assured, and I can inform to the Bahamian people that no tax will come in place without consultation with the Bahamian people and consultation with the industry in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
Yeah, okay then. Okay, when that time comes, we'll deal with it.
So let me say something. Let me say something. Can I say something?
But GBPA first.
Which is,
Yeah.
you do not need
You don't own it?
legislation to consult. You could go and consult today.
Yes.
Why would you need a piece of legislation that gives you the power to do it just to talk to people?
You got that letter.
You could go and talk to people now.
You got that letter.
If they are not intending to proceed,
that letter.
they are not intending to proceed with this year, withdraw this bill and bring it back after your consultation. Bring it back after your consultation, and then let's debate it after your consultation. Because your consultation may actually come back and tell you, do not bother with this. But you would have already put in place the mechanism to collect it. We don't believe you. We don't believe you. We do not believe you. We don't believe you. We don't believe you.
Members,
See yours.
the chair recognizes the honorable member for
They don't
Thompson.
believe you either.
We see yours.
So, this is not a point, I just wanted to let them know, there's a mechanism, though, I keep telling you that, there's a mechanism. Yeah, in the Interpretation of General Clauses Act. Any order which comes here, first of all, if it's done by order, it's got to be laid here. And once it's laid here, you got 6 weeks to move a resolution to negative it. That's in the law now, so no issue.
Thank you very much.
You may continue on.
The member for Tall Pines has said
Let's debate it.
that they are laying this in order to consult. Well, unfortunately, oh, come on, man. Come on. Come on. That's what he said. Come on, man. Come on. That's what he said. That's what he said. You laying it so you can consult. That's what you said.
That's exactly what
That's what you
The
said.
chair recognizes the honorable
That's what you said.
member for Tall Pines.
Yes. The member is again misleading this House and the Bahamian people.
That happens, so that's all.
We made it very clear, and I want to say it again. This particular bill is currently on the agenda as part of what we're doing. I want the Bahamian people to understand, and the members opposite to understand, that we are not going to proceed with the implementation of any tax as it relates to this bill without consultation to the Bahamian people and without consultation with the members of the opposition.
You can't tell us what to do.
After consultation. Madam Speaker, I move on. But I coming back to this later
The
on.
wholesalers wrote you it. Wholesalers wrote you.
Madam Speaker, on the $110 million loan to
Wholesalers called
BPL,
you. I know. We
on the
know.
$110 million loan, the Debt Management
They
Act,
call Cat Island.
sections 36 and 41, lay out the provisions for government lending to any entity. The act also restricts lending that does not fall within those provisions. So you can't lend unless you fit within those provisions of the Debt Management Act. Most critically, Section 38(2) states that any lending must come from sums appropriated from Parliament. Those sums that are appropriated from Parliament are in this book. Madam Speaker, we call upon the government to indicate what appropriations were made by Parliament for this $110 million loan lending to BPL. If there is no appropriation for this lending, it is clearly and patently illegal. Or alternatively, the government will have to use the budgetary mechanisms to transfer funds already appropriated by Parliament into an appropriate line item to effect the loan. But the law is clear. In other words, the government will have to show this sum is in a budgetary expenditure. It must show the line item in the budget. And this, in fact, means that if there is an additional $110 million expense, it will blow the budget deficit wide open. Madam Speaker, the PLP has also presented what I would call an incomplete budget. Their own law gives specifically what should be included in this budget. The fourth schedule of their Public Financial Management Act 2023 states as follows: that the annual budget shall have estimates of financing, which financing information for the previous 2 years, both actual and budget, and projected financing for the current year, which is the year coming, and the next 3 years. So you should have information about your previous 2 years, your most current year, and the next 3 years you should have in your budget estimates. Well, clearly, Madam Speaker, the government's estimates only include the current year and the next 2 years. They are missing a year. To proceed, again, means that it is not in compliance with the law, and I would say the budget is incomplete. Madam Speaker, on inflation crisis, the central bank states the average domestic consumer price inflation, specifically average cost increased, recreation increased by 16.9%. The average inflation for food and non-alcoholic beverages increased by 13.4%. Restaurants and hotels increased by 11.4%. Health increased by 4.8%. Housing, water, gas, electricity all increased by 4.5%. The budget does nothing to mitigate the rising food prices. Not only did you not include any measures to assist persons with inflation, but you reduced the expenditure on certain heads in the social services budget. On page 136, you have reduced the heads for food assistance program by 1.3 million. You have reduced the subsistence support of persons by over 2.4 million. And your emergency desk assistance, that's when people who come and emergency and they need help, you've reduced that by over $2.1 million. Madam Speaker, this is a total of over $5.8 million you have reduced these heads by. Tell the people in East Grand Bahama that everyone got the help they needed. Tell them that the help they got was sufficient. Tell them that those who needed home repair, that everybody got help, those who needed. If you can't tell them that, why would you be reducing those heads? Madam Speaker, the Prime Minister then committed to a revised management policy that emphasized a much greater, and he spoke about this morning, a much greater Bahamian dollar borrowing, that we were borrowing more locally. That's what he said, that there's a policy now that they wanted to seek to borrow more locally. But alas, Madam Speaker, as is typical, the PLP says one thing and does another. Yes. That's why we don't believe you. Would you believe, Madam Speaker, that despite bashing the F&M for its foreign borrowing, the vast majority of additional $1.1 billion in debt that the PLP government has taken on has been in foreign currency? Despite all the talk that they have come around there doing the very same thing that the F&M did. Yes. In simple terms, Madam Speaker, the PLP has added $1.1 billion to the national debt since coming to take office. And of that, 900 million, or 82%, is foreign currency. Prime Minister Davis, in his October 27, 2021 communication to this place, that the government, in their supplemental budget, this is what he said. He said, unfortunately, with the visibly poor fiscal management, confidence of the Bahamian government weakened the international markets. And he spoke about our bonds. And our bonds are trading at a distressed level. That's what he said in October of 2021. Madam Speaker, what were the distress levels that the Prime Minister was referencing? At that time, in the midst of a pandemic, the 2021 bonds were trading at around 87 cents in the dollar. 87. If the Prime Minister concluded that poor fiscal management was the reason for the significantly discounted value of the bonds at that time, then what does he say when just only yesterday, June 6, 2023, the same bonds were trading at 75 cents to the dollar? When they came, it was 86. Now, it is 75. And they criticized us for it. They said it was because of our bad management. But now theirs is lower. Madam Speaker, you heard right, despite the fact that the Bahamian economy, despite the fact that the Bahamian economy has full strength, and despite all of the talk about on the other side of the record revenues, and despite the fact that the government engaged Rothschilds for an undisclosed $1 million contract that they refused to reveal to the Bahamian people, our bonds are trading in worse position today than they were in October of 2021, when the Prime Minister claimed that 87 cents at that time was due to fiscal mismanagement by the previous administration. Madam Speaker, I move to Grand Bahama. Grand Bahama, Madam Speaker, I hear what the member for Foxhill says, and some of what he says, we on this side have no difficulties with. Grand Bahama.
Some of it.
But Madam Speaker, the bottom line is Grand Bahama deserves better. Grand Bahama deserves better. The facts speak for themselves that 2022, the Grand Bahama economy had an economic decline of 9%, or $154 million. With no hurricanes, no COVID-19, but you had a worse decline, and I believe Grand Bahama has probably declined worse than any place else in the country. With no COVID and no hurricane, 9% decline. This is simply incredible. No Hurricane Dorian, no COVID-19, and yet you have declined by 9%.
Three PLP ministers live there. Three PLP
While
ministers live there.
we have heard about the airport project, we still have not yet seen any details about this project. We must ask, and I ask this genuinely, because, sip, sip is sip, sip. There's talk and stuff out there. But what amount of dredging is being proposed in the airport project? Dredging. What amount of dredging is being proposed in the airport project? And who will benefit from the removal of Bahamian resources? I leave that right there.
3 ministers.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Exuma Right Canada.
Was ranting and raving about a question being asked by another member, and he does the same thing. It is shameful, Madam Speaker.
Oh, now shameful. Okay, yeah. Now shameful.
The resources of any mining project, a property owned by the government, is the property of the government and shall always be the property of the government until there's some transaction. Otherwise, in this case, there is no such intended transaction.
Y'all don't disclose. We don't find out anyway. You don't disclose.
Thank you very much, member for Exuma.
Non-disclosure agreement.
Now we know that there is some dredging that is being proposed, but the government hasn't yet decided on where it should go. What I said was, now we understand that there is some proposed dredging there is dredging that is being proposed. The government will own it, and the government has not yet decided on who or what should happen to the dredging material. Yes, that's what I said. Yeah. Until you decide, because you haven't yet decided. Until you decide who it should go to.
You're in education, so don't worry about that.
Madam Speaker, the proposed, and like I said, I leave that there, because dredging in Grand Bahama, dredging in Grand Bahama is a very, very serious and very emotive undertaking. I leave that there. The proposed hospital, or should I say, the proposed clinic that is being proposed in Grand Bahama, that ground was broken for, again, I say fail to fulfill what is really needed in Grand Bahama. This means that you will not be getting a new hospital for many, many, many more years to come. We are still waiting to hear what's happening with the hotel, but mum's the word with what's happening with the hotel. Now I understand. Now I understand that we are having a employment project that is worth, I think, $4.5, $4.7 million. I think the Prime Minister said $4.5 million. But you have taken away. You have taken away in your. I'm not yielding. You have taken away over $4 million. You've taken away over $4 million from the beautiful Grand Bahama project. Point of order.
State the point of order. What is the point of order?
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Yamagra.
Mr. Speaker from Kalani. You want to be the speaker also? You want to be the speaker? Madam Speaker, I just needed some clarity. The member is, Madam Speaker, the point of order is the member opposing the hospital building in Grand Bahama? Because
That's a question.
I just need clarity.
You're making these Grand Bahama.
He will be having an employment project of $4.5 million. But you are taking over $4 million from the beautiful Grand Bahama project, which hired many people. Well, if it's the same project, say it's the same project. Do not make it appear as though this is a new employment project, because the same people who were employed by the beautiful Grand Bahama project will be the same people who are employed by this new $4.5 million. So there is no new employment project. There was almost 300 people that was employed by the beautiful Grand Bahama project. And I thank you for that project, because plenty of people in East Grand Bahama were employed. But there is no new project. All you are doing is continue. You move $4 million from one head to another head. That's all you did. Madam Speaker, the PM also spoke about domestic economic conditions.
Sleight of hands.
He spoke about domestic economic conditions. Yes, the Bahamas had growth of 14%, which is very welcome news. In fact, they keep saying that they met in place a recession. They met in place an economic disaster.
Untrue.
But what they met in place was a growing economy, because in 2021, the economy grew by 13%. In 2022, it grew by 14%. So when they came into effect in September, it was actually growing.
Yes.
So they met in place a growing economy, Madam Speaker. They met in place revenue that would be above projections.
Yes.
I caution the government, though, to read the central bank's report, which states that growth is slowing as we reach the end of the COVID-19 recovery. Also, the PLP is not doing enough for family island development. For example, Abaco, Long Island, Illustra, and Michael all had an economic decline. The most interesting thing about this, though, is that from 2020 to 2021, all those islands had an economic boom or an economic increase, upgrowth. They had growth. In 2020 to 2021, it was economic growth. But after 2022, or during 2022, it went down.
Go Google it.
It went down. Check the statistics. Check statistics.
Go Google it. Yeah.
The PLP has simply wasted an opportunity. They've wasted an opportunity on the Family Island Capital Fund. Madam Speaker, you remember last year. Last year, there was when they mentioned that they were doing this Family Island Fund, everybody was bombing on the table. Bombing.
Break up the old
Oh, we're going to do wonders in the Family Islands. Well, do you know, Madam Speaker, how much money they actually spent from this Family Island Fund? $0. $0. It's in the budget. They spent $0 out of this Family Island Fund, Madam Speaker. But they've allocated the same amount for this year. Well, I hope they have a little bit more. I hope they at least spend $1 on this year, Madam Speaker. So the F&M created, Madam Speaker, a free trade zone for Family Islands, starting businesses duty-free, bringing items like cars and the inventory duty-free and VAT-free. The budget does not have enough or does not do enough to address the needs of Family Islanders, particularly in Abaco and Grand Bahama. Madam Speaker,
That's why Mike Alley here today.
the Prime Minister says in his budget communication, no new taxes. He said no new taxes in his budget communication. This is a complete load of you know what.
No, we don't know.
I am still trying. I am still trying to get my head around what was the government even thinking about by making that kind of a statement.
My Lord.
The budget communication should be clear and precise. You did increase taxes.
Yes, you did.
You did include new taxes and fees.
Yes.
It is plain and simple, and to say otherwise is simply not true.
Yes.
You added more to harbor dues. You added more to the Port Authority fees. You expect to have over, wait a minute. You expect to have over $1 million. You expect to have more than over $1 million in harbor dues. This will translate into higher shipping costs and higher import costs. So don't say that only 5% of Bahamians will be affected, because when you do this, all of Bahamians will be affected by the increase in costs. Bahamians will be paying more for food, more for gas, more for clothing. There is also an apparent new condominium tax on page 15 of the revenue stream. It's a new condominium tax.
Listen.
In fact, they expect to receive $2 million on this new condominium tax. You even call it a tax. So how could you then say that there is no new taxes? Under the new Business License Act, Madam Speaker, hotels, IBCs, insurance companies will be paying more, which translate into higher costs for Bahamian consumers. Then there is this new tourism environmental tax. They call it a tax. That's what they call it. We didn't say tax. They call it an environmental, tourism environmental tax.
Interchangeable.
This will be paid by cruise ship passengers. Now I ask, have you consulted on this? Where is the studies that show that this won't negatively affect our cruise product? Bahamians, though, will be paying an additional $4 for traveling in and out of the Bahamas. Bahamians will be paying, under your passenger tax, check it out, Bahamians will be paying an additional $4, $2 to leave, and $2 to come back. That was not said by the Prime Minister that Bahamians will be paying this additional amount of money. Bahamians will also, under the Tourism Development Corporation bill, the one that they don't want to debate, all tourism-related enterprises operating in the Bahamas will be paying a fee. Also, the road traffic, again, no mention about this, road traffic will now be charging a fee for a road traffic record. I'm not sure what the road traffic record is, but that's what they say. Also, on the sugar tax, studies have showed, and I've made this point before in the House, that studies have showed that yes, putting in place a tax on sugary items does to some extent bring the use of that item down. But what has an even greater effect is if you reduce the amount that it costs for healthy foods.
That's it.
That's what we are proposing. That's the solution to this. Reduce the cost on healthy foods.
Yes.
So, Madam Speaker, the F&M calls on the government to first, we call upon the government to first implement subsidies for healthy foods.
Members,
We call upon you to first implement subsidies for healthy foods, such as fruits and vegetables, before you increase the tax burden on working Bahamians. Madam Speaker,
Restrain yourself. Restrain yourself.
in the VAT bill, there is a section that deals with vacation home owners, Airbnbs. Now, Madam Speaker, we have a very strong Airbnb market that continues to grow. This provides a steady stream of income for Bahamians, but more importantly, it provides a steady stream of ownership for Bahamians in this tourism market. In fact, many Bahamians have opted to stay at Airbnbs when traveling locally. I stay in an Airbnb when I travel to Nassau. But the amendments made to the VAT Act, you have just made it. See, I'm not tuning into that. You have just made it more expensive. You've made it more expensive for me and other Bahamians to stay in Nassau, and you have made it more expensive for Bahamians to stay in the family islands. Because you have now said that if I stay at an Airbnb, which I will stay in an Airbnb if I come to Nassau, if I go to a family island, that I must now, those owners must now charge VAT. And no, they do not charge VAT now. They only pay VAT. They only pay VAT if their Airbnb is connected to a site. If your Airbnb is not connected to a site, then you are not charged VAT. Look at the VAT bill. The VAT bill says that whether or not your Airbnb is attached to a site, you are going to be charged.
For East Grand Bahama realize that any rental where the property nets more than $100,000 a year is currently subject to VAT. Currently subject to VAT. So if he stays at an Airbnb when he comes here, and it adds up to more than $100,000 a year, he should be paying VAT now. And so it strikes me, Madam Speaker, that they don't seem to read the legislation that they're critiquing.
thank you, Honourable Member.
That is true. Then why is it that you need to have a section that says vacation home rentals, no, we ain't debating here. That vacation home rental. I'm gonna make my presentation. You're gonna answer afterward. That vacation home rentals will now be subjected to VAT, whether or not you are attached to any site. So, I don't, the person who I rent the place from, it's not through a site. I pay them direct. So now, even if I pay them direct, I will now have to pay VAT. Once they charge me the VAT, I will now have to pay VAT. Madam Speaker, on domestic banks, the budget communication is known for what it says, but more importantly, for what it does not say. The budget communication is known for what it says,
Tremendous omission.
but more importantly for what it does not say. Madam Speaker, 2 cabinet ministers spoke publicly of their displeasure of what the banks are doing to people, particularly in the Family Islands. This budget communication said absolutely nothing about it.
They ain't listening to you, you might as well join.
They said, this budget communication said, it didn't even acknowledge that there is a problem with banking in the Family Islands. The Prime Minister took 2 hours last time and another 2 hours this morning. And I suspect he can take another 3 or 4 hours afterward, but did not mention anything about even acknowledging that the 2 cabinet ministers, yes, they are right, yes, there's challenges, and here is what we can do about it. It was completely silent about anything to do with domestic banking.
The plight of our people.
Madam Speaker, one would have thought that this would have featured as a high priority to addressing and fixing this very serious problem. 2 cabinet ministers in this place spoke about it.
And 1 chairman.
2 cabinet ministers and a
3
chairman
positions.
spoke about it.
3.
So one would have thought that the budget communication, that the 2 hours that the Prime Minister took today was going to at least mention and acknowledge that something is going to be done about fixing this challenging problem, Madam Speaker.
So y'all doing it with the
Mum's the word, Madam Speaker. Mum's the word, as it said, when it comes to what this government is going to do to help those persons in the Family Islands. What are they going to do to help those struggling Family Islands, Madam Speaker? Madam Speaker, the sand dollar, the central bank's digital currency, is the first in the world.
When did it happen? When did it start?
Countries all over the world are watching what this central bank is doing and what happens with this central bank currency. Countries from China, the US, all over the world are coming and asking the central bank, what's happening, how is it working, what's going on, how is it developing? And there was no mention whatsoever on how the sand dollar will be advanced or integrated in the public sector. The FNM, Madam Speaker, started the process of allowing it to be used to pay for government services. What is the progress on this? What is happening with respect to that project? One of the things that we were very focused on, Madam Speaker, one of the things we were extremely focused on was how do we advance the entire digitization project. And I am actually with the member for Bain and Grandstown. I want him to succeed. I want him to build on the things that we started. I want him to succeed, and I want him to build. Because that was a major pillar.
Minister of Digitization.
That was a major pillar in the previous government's economic plan on how we continue this. And I hope that the member for Bain and Grandstown, when he speaks, will give us a complete report in terms of what's happening with it. How are you proceeding? No, I want him to succeed. I want him to succeed. Madam Speaker, travel and subsistence.
Oh, yeah. Let's hear it.
Finally, the government has listened to the opposition and has listened to the people and has reduced the travel budget. Finally, they have listened to the people and have reduced the travel budget. However, it is still higher than the F&M budget of 2021-2022. It is simply unbelievable that you would increase the budget during the supplemental exercise. It is completely unbelievable that you would even exercise, that you would even go to that extent. They don't want me to talk. They don't want me to talk, Madam Speaker. They don't want me to talk.
Discipline yourself.
Members. There's a member on the floor.
Discipline yourself.
They don't want me to talk, Madam Speaker. Madam
Members.
Speaker.
You're doing good, man. You're doing good. You're in education. Discipline yourself. Discipline yourself.
Madam Speaker. On ceremonial. No, I only have 9 minutes. Let me finish my 9 minutes. Let me finish my 9 minutes. Let me finish my 9 minutes, then you could speak. Let me finish my 9 minutes. I only have a little bit more to go, Madam Speaker. I only have a little bit more to go.
Point of order. The good gentleman from East Grand Bahama likes to tell us.
What's the point of order?
I'm saying it. Likes to tell us that 2021, the PLP was only in power for the last 4 months. It is disingenuous to compare 2022 to 2021. It would be more honest to compare 2022 to 2018.
Thank you, Honorable Member.
Ceremonial spending
I think
in the cabinet budget. Madam Speaker, I cannot understand how you could spend over $3 million in 9 months on ceremonial events for this budget year.
We going back to it?
And we have also budgeted another $3.4 million for ceremonial events for this year. So we spent $3 million last year, and we budgeted another $3.4 million this year for ceremonial events. I understand.
You can't even count that one.
That it is the 50th anniversary. I understand that. But why have a party when the ordinary people are still suffering?
That's what it was.
Why have these events when the ordinary people are still suffering, Madam Speaker? I believe, Madam Speaker, that the committee wants to measure MPs for
26.
ceremonial jackets.
26.
So, Madam Speaker, I didn't get measured. I'm not getting measured. I do not need a ceremonial jacket. I could buy my own jacket. I could wear my own jacket. And I suggest, Madam Speaker, that we give the amount that they were prepared to spend to pay me pay for a jacket for me, I suggest that you give that to a homeowner in East Grand Bahama to fix their roof or to fix their house. Because, Madam Speaker, it doesn't add anything to me for you to buy me a jacket to a pair. So, Madam Speaker,
Members,
again, small business assistance, Madam Speaker. You committed, the Prime Minister said, that they were going to give $50 million for small business assistance. He didn't say that. I listened to this previous communication. To the previous communication, he said they were going to spend $250 million over 5 years. He didn't say they were going to spend $50 million this year. That's a difference. Because if you look in the budget, there is no $50 million for small business development anywhere in the budget. We ask you to present to us where in the budget or where else you are going to provide $50 million for small business for $50 million. Now, Madam Speaker, as I begin to wrap up, there are a few things that I believe this budget should have included. Because the Prime Minister made mention about us, not, and the member from Marco City is going to lay out a complete economic plan for our country. He's going to lay out a complete strategy, a complete economic strategy. But, Madam Speaker, one of the things that I suggest this government could have done or ought to have done is funding for
The same one you support. And you with me?
a national tax credit program
You and Chester.
that gives you a tax credit on VAT or real property tax for employing new employees or for making investments. Madam Speaker, what we need to do is we ought to use incentives that would assist small businesses, not make it more difficult for them, but we need to provide them with incentives to hire more employees, to make more investments. And the way how we do that is by providing them with specific tax credits. Madam Speaker, it is a process that could happen because the FNM actually implemented and started to implement that process, where you could have used the monies that you would be paying for VAT. You could use that to pay for your new employees. Madam Speaker, number 2, the home porting program.
No, you ignored it.
Madam Speaker, there was a lot said in terms of the passenger tax for cruise ship passengers. So we are seeking to extract as much as we can in terms of the tax dollars from cruise ship passengers or from the cruise ships. But, Madam Speaker, one thing that I believe this government may have missed during the pandemic that opened, I believe, all of our eyes, when Royal Caribbean decided to just have one boat to home port in the Bahamas. Just one. They have, I mean, I'm not sure how many ships that they have, but they just decided to have one boat, or one, they don't like when you call it boat, but one ship that home ported in the Bahamas. The economic impact that that one vessel had when it came to home porting, Madam Speaker, was tremendous.
The signal it sent.
All you had to do was look at the photos of the persons coming in and out of the airport. The airport was completely full because you had persons who flew in, because let me just say for those who may not be familiar with home porting, was that you have people who fly in, you bus them from the airport, and then you take them to the vessel or take them to the hotel or to the vessel, and then they would go on their cruise ship. The cruise ship comes back here. They are then taken through our airport, and what it does is it means also that they will be able to spend even more additional time in shopping and money and hotels and so on. All we need is just one. And if we leveraged this whole position in terms of extracting the taxes, the additional taxes from them, Madam Speaker, and we said, we want you to just home port one vessel in the Bahamas, Madam Speaker, that would be a tremendous benefit to the Bahamas. Madam Speaker, also, we believe that what should be specified in this act is women, disabled, and youth small businesses funding. We also need, Madam Speaker, the additional digitization when it comes to additional services. We also need, Madam Speaker, actual movement on the Sovereign Wealth Fund and actual movement on the Family Island Development Fund. It cannot be where we just pass a piece of legislation and bam on the table and say, yes, we've done a wonderful job. We must actually implement those things and fund them, and then once we fund them, we must actually see it through so that it actually brings some benefit to us, Madam Speaker. Also, Madam Speaker, we must increase funding for Bahamians so that they can develop family island Airbnbs. That's right. One of the things that we had said we were going to start in our last budget was that we were going to provide funding for family island when it came to them developing the Airbnbs. All we need to do is look at Exuma. I spoke to a lady this morning from Exuma who said that Exuma is booming because all of the residents are rented out as Airbnbs. Well, Madam Speaker, imagine if we provided the same kind of funding that is necessary in all of the other family islands so that people would be able to develop their own properties and then would be able to rent them out as Airbnbs. Madam Speaker, there is a tremendous opportunity that is being missed by this government. All they needed to do was to provide the necessary funding to develop the Airbnbs. Madam Speaker, also, we also need a real Crown land reform, making it available for Bahamians, along with real land reform. Madam Speaker, if I could just have 3 minutes and then I'm done. Just 3 minutes and I'm done. And then finally, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And then, Madam Speaker, we need to have a real Crown land reform, making those Crown lands available for Bahamians. Yes. And what we also need to do, we had drafted legislation, so the legislation should be there, was that once you put in place legislation for the land that people are the generation property, so that generation property, you would be able to get title for the generation property, and once you are able to use that title to go to the bank and so on, Madam Speaker, getting title to property is putting wealth in the hands of Bahamians. And that is a real project that this government needs to pass. And then, Madam Speaker, finally, Madam Speaker, please, just pass the medical cannabis legislation. Just pass. All they needed to do was the legislation that we drafted. If you need to tweak it, you could tweak it. If you need to change it, change it. But just pass it. Because that, again, put wealth in the hands of Bahamians. It put wealth directly in the hands of Bahamians. And so, Madam Speaker, as I take my seat, this budget, Madam Speaker, we are on our 50th anniversary. We are on our 50th anniversary. This budget should have equated and should really have put forward a bold, it really should have put forward a complete strategy, a complete 50-year strategy. It is a missed opportunity to develop how the Bahamas was, how the Bahamas is, and how the Bahamas ought to be for the next 50 years. So, Madam Speaker,
on his feet.
I am-
On his feet. Just relax.
I am-
On his feet.
I am very pleased. I am very pleased, Madam Speaker,
Yes.
to conclude this budget debate. And I am sure that the member from Marco City,
Yes.
and along with all of our colleagues,
Close it.
will specifically say
Yes.
what should happen and how this
The chair
country should
recognizes
be
the honourable
improved.
member
Madam
from
Speaker,
West
this
Palm.
government
And Bimini.
Madam
It's
Speaker,
done.
the member, come on, Madam Speaker, it is really.
The chair recognizes the honourable member from West Palm and Bimini.